The series begins in 2012, 3 years before Kim Do-young's girlfriend disappeared. Back then, bad groups connected to loan sharks would kill people and take their organs. If someone couldn't pay their debt, the loan sharks would hand them over to these groups and get paid in return. It was like human trafficking. These groups would take people who couldn't pay their debts and make them slaves. They were forced to work in drug factories, become beggars, or do worse things. Once they were no longer useful, the groups would kill them and take their organs. They would also make these people get expensive insurance so they could get money from that too. Song Hak-soo was the leader of one of these groups, and Detective Yoon-mi was investigating him. At that time, Detective Yoon-mi started watching Hak-soo after finding a body with missing organs. She collected evidence and planned to arrest him. The day finally came for the arrest, and it was a tough battle with many victims. But after a hard fight, Detective Yoon-mi managed to capture Hak-soo and took him to trial. 3 years later, in 2015, Do-young goes into a jewelry store and buys a ring because he wants to propose to his girlfriend. But before meeting her, he goes on a blind date to see if he might feel different about another girl. However, during the blind date, he still thinks about his girlfriend, Ju-young, and decides he definitely wants to propose to her. Soon after, Do-young goes to see Ju-young and invites her to visit her family's house. He doesn't tell her about the proposal, only that he wants to have lunch with them. At the lunch, in front of Ju-young's mom and brother, Do-young asks for their blessing to marry Ju-young. Her family is happy about this, but Ju-young seems confused and not very excited. On their way back to their apartment, Ju-young tells Do-young she doesn't want to get married because she's worried his mom won't approve. Do-young knows she is just scared of being rejected by his family. To reassure her, he gives her the ring he bought. Instead of making her happy, the ring makes Ju-young more nervous, so she decides to go back to her family that night. She wants to calm herself down, but her mom's words about her past and the chance to marry a rich man make her even more unsure. Almost at midnight, Do-young calls Ju-young. She is still unsure and asks for more time to think. Meanwhile, Ju-young is really worried about Hak-soo, who is from her past. Hak-soo is in prison now, but he still watches Ju-young through his men. She knows that Hak-soo won't just let her go. She's scared that Do-young will get into big trouble if he marries her. Even though life with Do-young seems promising, and she has a good job as a bank manager, she is also pregnant with his child. She can't leave the father of her baby. Problems start when Ju-young decides to accept Do-young's proposal. His job as a bank manager often involves checking companies that work with his bank. Do-young suspects that Saereo, a company owned by loan shark Park Tae-gyu, is still doing bad things under Hak-soo's protection. But Do-young can't investigate because his boss forbids him from disturbing the company. One day, after work, Ju-young is waiting at Do-young's apartment to tell him the good news about their future child and talk about marriage. But when Do-young comes home, Ju-young is gone. She left after getting calls and messages from unknown numbers. She didn't clean up the kitchen where she was cooking and left her proposal ring on the kitchen table. At that time, Do-young tries to find her at work and with her family, but no one knows where she is. On the 4th day after Ju-young disappeared, Do-young felt hopeless and went to the police station to report it. At first, Detective Kim handled his report. There, Detective Kim gave him a missing person form but said they couldn't process it unless a family member reported it. Since Do-young and Ju-young weren't married, the report was invalid, and he had to bring Ju-young's family to report it. Holding back his anger, Do-young called Ju-young's older brother to come to the police station and make the report. When they went back to Ju-young's house, her brother and his wife found a pregnancy test that showed Ju-young was pregnant. This made Do-young even sadder and more confused. He didn't know where to look for his girlfriend, so he had to wait for updates from the police. To cheer himself up a little, Do-young bought a baby cot, hoping to find Ju-young soon and take care of their child together. Meanwhile, at the police station, Detective Yoon-mi saw Ju-young's missing person report by accident. The photo shocked Yoon-mi because she knew Ju-young. Ju-young was the informant who helped Yoon-mi arrest Hak-soo before. Remembering this, Yoon-mi took over the case from Detective Kim. She believed Ju-young's disappearance was connected to Hak-soo's crimes. The next day, Detective Yoon-mi, along with Detective Kim and Detective Oh, went to Do-young's apartment. They told him about Ju-young's past and where she might be. Do-young also started thinking about how he met Ju-young 3 years ago. It was raining that day, and Ju-young took shelter in front of Do-young's office. She caught his eye. At that time, Do-young lent her his umbrella while he chose to get wet in the rain. Surprisingly, Ju-young chased after him and asked why he lent his umbrella to a stranger. Then, they ended up drinking together that night, even though Do-young had never drunk before. However, they didn't become close right away. In fact, Ju-young disappeared without giving him any contact info. A year later, they met again in front of Do-young's office on another rainy day. This time, she brought an umbrella and approached him. They started dating then, and Ju-young never disappeared again until now. This time, there were no clues in the apartment about where she went. Their relationship had always been good. Do-young even bought the apartment because he wanted to marry Ju-young and had been saving money and gathering courage to propose. He told Yumi that he didn't know Ju-young was pregnant until the night she disappeared. Do-young has been searching everywhere for Ju-young for the past 3 days, but hasn't found her. He doesn't know who her friends are either. Feeling desperate, Do-young went to the police station for help. Unfortunately, Yumi's investigation is just starting, so there's no big progress in finding Ju-young yet. They also have no witnesses. Then, Do-young found a piece of paper with a phone number on Ju-young's car dashboard. After thinking about it, he decided to call the number, which was connected to Park Taegyu. At that time, Do-young didn't know who he was calling. Even after talking to Taegyu, Do-young thought the number should be traced. So, he went to the police station to give the number to Yoonmi. However, he overheard Detective Kim saying bad things about him, so he didn't give the number. Also, Yumi's questions about Ju-young's past work made her realize that Do-young didn't really know much about his future wife's past. He thought Ju-young had lived abroad before, not that she had worked with criminals and been a police informant. Elsewhere, Yumi meets Hyung-shik, her colleague who once helped with Hak-soo's case. There, Yumi tells him about Ju-young disappearing and thinks it might be connected to Hak-soo. Hyung-shik isn't sure because Hak-soo is still in prison and warns Yumi not to handle cases related to her informants. Yumi feels sorry for Ju-young, knowing she is pregnant and plans to live with the man she loves. To be with Do-young, Ju-young has made sacrifices by betraying Hak-soo and helping Yoonmi as an informant. It took a year for Ju-young to meet Yoonmi again because she had to make sure Hak-soo was in prison long enough. Meanwhile, Do-young is very depressed. He asks his friend Han-ju to get drunk with him, then gives him Taegyu's number, asking him to track it. At that time, Han-ju asks for payment for this service. If Do-young had given the number to Yoonmi, she would have tracked it for free. But the situation gets more complicated when Yoonmi finds out that Hak-soo has been released from prison on probation. This means Ju-young is in danger. Soon after, Yumi decides to track down Hak-soo, thinking that finding him might lead her to Ju-young. Meanwhile, Do-young ran into some trouble at work. The factory director, who owed money to Taegyu and worked with Do-young's bank, caused a scene. He claimed his daughter was kidnapped because of Do-young. Do-young didn't understand what Director Park meant and thought the man was just drunk because his company was almost bankrupt. Even though this didn't directly affect Do-young, it added to his worries. But he remained determined to find Ju-young. After hearing from Han-ju that he had tracked down the owner of the phone number, Do-young decided to investigate the address himself. The address led him to an old, poorly maintained building where he saw a man coming out of one of the apartments. Feeling suspicious, Do-young followed the man to another building with game shops. His actions almost got him into serious trouble, but he managed to hide and secretly watch the place. Do-young then discovered that Director Park, who had caused the scene at the bank, was there asking Taegyu where his daughter was. Taegyu had previously threatened to take Park's daughter if he didn't pay his debt. Meanwhile, Do-young doesn't really understand how Taegyu is connected to Ju-young's disappearance. Despite this, he tries to find Taegyu and skips a dinner party with his bosses that Taegyu will attend. Soon after, Do-young meets Taegyu in a private room booked by his boss. Not expecting to spend the night together, Do-young feels stuck and tries to control his emotions in front of Taegyu and his boss. Almost midnight, when his bosses leave early because they are drunk, Do-young finally gets a chance to talk to Taegyu. There, he realizes that Do-young was the one who called him the day before. Shortly after, Do-young asks Taegyu where Ju-young is, but he doesn't answer and instead orders 2 of his men to arrest Do-young. What many people don't know is that Do-young was a former Navy member and trained to defeat multiple people at once, so his martial arts skills are very strong. Beating Taegyu's 2 men was easy for him. After that, Taegyu says he doesn't know Ju-young and quickly runs away. Do-young chases him on the highway, but Taegyu, scared, asks the police for help. The police then chase Do-young with a patrol unit that was nearby. Meanwhile, Do-young calls Yoon-mi for help with the police patrol. When Do-young pulls over and Yoon-mi vouches for him, one of the officers notices something strange in the trunk of Do-young's car and asks him to open it. They panic when they see what's inside, and it was the frozen body of Hak-soo. Do-young is arrested because of the body in his car. Yoon-mi is confused and wonders who could have killed Hak-soo and put him in Do-young's car. At that time, Yoon-mi doesn't believe that Do-young killed Hak-soo. Tae-gyu is temporarily detained at the police station for driving while drunk, but this is actually to protect him on Yoon-mi's orders. Haeong-sik observes Do-young in the interrogation room. They know Hak-soo was released the day before Ju-young disappeared, but they don't know what really happened, whether Hak-soo met Do-young to tell him about Ju-young. Or is there something else they don't know? At that moment, Yoon-mi suspects another person killed Hak-soo, based on the long cut on his body. This cut seems to be made by a professional who is skilled with a knife. The killer also used dry ice around the body to hide the smell and kept it hidden after the murder. Yoon-mi cannot suspect Do-young because he is a strict and moral bank employee, and it seems impossible for him to plan such a cruel and well-thought-out murder. When Yoon-mi enters the interrogation room, she is confused by Do-young's statement. There, Do-young asks whose body was in the trunk of his car, showing that he didn't know what he had been carrying all day. Annoyed by the false accusations, Do-young gets angry because he was made a suspect without proper investigation. Then, Yoon-mi decides to look for evidence with Haeong-sik before deciding if Do-young should be arrested. The next day, investigators go to Do-young's apartment and office to interview people about Ju-young and Do-young. Many people say that he loves Ju-young very much and that they are an unusual couple. However, they also say that Do-young is a good man who wouldn't commit a crime. To everyone, he seems perfect and kind, making it hard to believe he could commit murder. This testimony makes Yoon-mi think there might be another person behind this, trying to frame Do-young. So, she brings Do-young back to the interrogation room to talk about Hak-soo and Ju-young's past relationship. But hearing that surprised him a lot. Do-young actually met Ju-young long before they met at the bank. He had come home drunk and accidentally vomited in front of Ju-young, who then took him home. Even though he was half-conscious, Do-young remembered her face. When they met again, Do-young knew Ju-young had never left the country like she had told him, but he didn't try to find out about her past. He focused on the present and tried to find her now. However, Yoon-mi still suspected Do-young and didn't want to release him. As a detective, Yoon-mi felt that finding Ju-young was important to solve the case. With Haeong-sik's help, she met Ju-young's old friend who told her about Ju-young's first love. That man was Do-young, who was drunk and helped by Ju-young, but they had actually met long before that. Turns out, Ju-young had known Do-young since school, but when they met again, Do-young didn't seem to recognize her. After that incident, he secretly looked for Ju-young. The case got more complicated after Haeong-sik checked CCTV footage from Do-young's office and saw Hak-soo visiting. Hak-soo just made a call and left, and the trail disappeared on the highway. At that time, Yoon-mi and Haeong-sik thought Do-young met Hak-soo that day. They didn't know where they met, but Yoon-mi found Do-young's bicycle in front of a cafe. Soon after, Yoon-mi returned to the police station and told Do-young that she knew he met Hak-soo the day before Ju-young disappeared. She even accused Do-young of killing Hak-soo and making Ju-young disappear because he was jealous of their past relationship. At that moment, no one believed Do-young when he said he didn't know anything. Meanwhile, Tae-gyu was released without being questioned more about Ju-young. Haeong-sik took over the interrogation and seemed to blame Do-young. However, Do-young believes he is innocent and is determined to get out of prison, so he can look for Ju-young. Soon after, Haeong-sik tries to break into Do-young's apartment, thinking he can find evidence that Do-young is behind Hak-soo's murder and Ju-young's disappearance. Even though Do-young met Hak-soo on the day Ju-young disappeared, they were actually working together to protect Ju-young from something Hak-soo was worried about. The problem is, the accusations keep pointing to Do-young, and finding blood on the floor makes the detectives suspect him even more. Fortunately, Do-young's lawyer came and said that all the evidence they had was circumstantial, so they couldn't accuse Do-young of murder based only on assumptions. After that, Do-young was taken home by his mother. It turns out his mother never approved of his relationship with Ju-young because she had checked Ju-young's background. Ju-young was a courtesan in the past and the lover of a criminal. But Do-young still doesn't want to listen to his mother because he really loves Ju-young. Soon after, Do-young returned to the apartment and discovered bloodstains he hadn't noticed before. During the investigation, It was found that Ju Young had been bleeding because of a miscarriage caused by shock. Turns out, Ju Young wasn't missing cause she had gone to a clinic just 20 minutes away from the apartment. The shock happened because Hak-soo contacted her and threatened to harm Do-young if she didn't return to him. Ju Young felt she couldn't go back to Do-young after losing their baby. She was supposed to stay in the hospital for a few days, but she left the clinic that night without the doctors or nurses knowing, even though she was still very weak. This information proved that Do-young was innocent and didn't know anything about Ju Young's current whereabouts. Besides that, Yumi found evidence from the black box in Do-young's car showing that during the first 3 days of Ju Young's disappearance, he was just driving around looking for her. And the number Do-young kept calling wasn't actually Hak-soo's number. It belonged to a homeless person and was used by Hak-soo before being discarded. At that time, Yumi felt guilty for accusing Do-young without reason and wanted to apologize, but he refused to come out of his apartment. He only came out the next day to look for Taegyu, but when he arrived at Taegyu's company, he saw Taegyu being taken away by 3 men who were beating him. At first, Do-young wanted to stop talking to Taegyu, but a few minutes later, he decided to rescue Taegyu from the 3 men. Soon after, they went to a large field where he started asking Taegyu about Ju Young. Taegyu said he didn't know anyone named Ju Young, but he knew a woman named Yoon Ju-hee through her brother, Yoon Min-soo. Taegyu explained that Ju-hee worked at a club and Min-soo used her as collateral for his debt to Taegyu. When Do-young realized Ju Young was actually Ju-hee, Taegyu told him about Min-soo's debt and that it was out of his control. The men who wanted to take Taegyu were sent by problem solvers who had paid off Min-soo's debt, and Taegyu thought this had something to do with Ju-hee. In the middle of their conversation, Director So called Taegyu, asking where he was. Suddenly, Do-young grabbed the phone from Taegyu and was offered a deal to bring Taegyu to Director So, and he would answer all of Do-young's questions. While Do-young was distracted, Taegyu took a stun gun from the backseat and shocked Do-young until he was unconscious. Director So then ordered his men to track down Do-young and bring him to the office. On the way, Do-young deliberately messes himself to create a situation that forces Director So's subordinate to stop and clean it up. Do-young uses this chance to escape and return to his apartment. This incident gets Director So in trouble. Soon after, Chairman Kong calls Director So and demands that he find Hak-soo's killer immediately. Chairman Kong doesn't suspect Do-young of being the killer, even though Do-young had a motive. Instead, Chairman Kong is a bit suspicious of Director So, thinking he might have rivaled Hak-soo. Meanwhile, Jung-hwa is with Yoon-mi, who is investigating the case. There, Yumi realizes that Do-young's investigation has gone further than hers and that there are many secrets she doesn't know as a police officer. So, Do-young has known Jung-hwa for a long time, having met her secretly when she wanted to borrow money from Ju-young to avoid Taegyu. Ju-young kept this meeting a secret because she wanted to hide her past from Do-young, still thinking he didn't know anything. The next day, Do-young's investigation leads him back to Taegyu. He needs to meet him to find the lone shark leader, but Taegyu is ready to run away. The situation becomes more dangerous when Director So confronts Jung-hwa, forcing her to reveal Ju Young's whereabouts. Jung-hwa insists she doesn't know where Ju Young is, but when her phone is searched, they find a number connected to Ju Young from the Inzong area. Turns out, Ju Young took refuge in Incheon and lived with Lee Jin-suk, a woman who also used to work at the club. After knowing about that, Director So immediately went to Incheon to find her. Meanwhile, Jung-hwa managed to escape from her watchers and contacted Do-young to tell him where Ju Young was in Incheon. Racing against time and Director So, Do-young drove quickly to Incheon to meet his first love. So, in the past, Do-young and Ju Young went to the same school, but he was a senior. They first met when Ju Young stopped him from telling others that her mother was a fruit seller on the side of the road. Secretly, Do-young often paid attention to her, and Ju Young noticed him too. They became closer, even though it started with an argument. At that time, Do-young was convinced that Ju Young was a good person. However, because of her school interactions, she became someone who liked to bully others. Do-young wanted to protect and help Ju Young become a better person. After an incident where Do-young helped Ju-young when she was being bullied and almost harmed, Do-young had to change schools. His mother made sure all the kids causing problems were transferred or expelled. Even after this, Do-young still met Ju-young occasionally. Sometimes, Do-young saw her at the bank because Ju-young liked being around money. This is also why he decided to work at a bank. He pretended not to recognize Ju-young because she asked him to keep her past a secret when they were in school. Now, even though he knows all about Ju-young's past, Do-young continues to search for her in Incheon. On the other hand, Director So's subordinate found Jin-suk at a beachside restaurant. After questioning her, they learned that Ju-young was at the dock. Soon after, Do-young arrived, and Jin-suk recognized him and sent him to the dock. Meanwhile, Director So's men found Ju-young, hurt her, and knocked her out. They took her away, but Do-young managed to find and almost save her. However, he was outnumbered and lost, resulting in Ju-young being taken away again. At that time, Director So might eliminate her because she knows secrets from their past. 3 years earlier, when Ju-young was an informant, Director So found out that she recorded a conversation with Hak-soo to give to Yoonmi. Instead of reporting her, Director So offered to work together. He asked Ju-young to get a better recording and promised to give her money to pay off her father's debt to a loan shark. But Ju-young had to help him get rid of Hak-soo. Now, Director So is probably afraid that Chairman Kong will find out about his betrayal, which could put his life in danger. Meanwhile, Do-young, who finally regained consciousness, immediately contacted Yoonmi and asked her to track a cell phone he had secretly slipped into Director So's subordinate's pocket. They planned to find out where Ju-young was taken using that cell phone. While being transported, Ju-young woke up and managed to cause chaos in the car and take control of it. By evening, Do-young arrived at the location where the cell phone signal was tracked, accompanied by Yoonmi and Hyung-sik. They also called several police officers, and a fight broke out at the location. Do-young fought off Director So's men, while Ju-young tried to find a safe place to hide. Finally, Do-young managed to find her. From his jacket pocket, Do-young took out Ju-young's shoes that had fallen off. He put the shoes back on her feet and told her to go. They both cried at that moment. Ju-young felt guilty for putting Do-young in danger, but he insisted on staying with her to keep her safe. Just then, Director So's subordinate blocked their way again. There, Do-young told Ju-young to run and find Yoonmi for help while he stayed behind to fight the thugs. The fight was tough, and Do-young was almost defeated. Luckily, Yoonmi arrived and fired a warning shot, causing Director So's men to flee. However, Hyung-sik, who secretly had bad intentions and was working with Director So, captured Ju-young and knocked her out. On the other hand, Yoonmi couldn't find Ju-young right away because she had to help Do-young since he was in critical condition. Now, Ju-young was taken away by So's men, while Do-young was rushed to the hospital. The fight caused a slight brain bleed for Do-young, but it wasn't too serious. He just needed rest to recover. Yoonmi believed that Lee Jang-ho, Hak-soo's right-hand man, was now chasing and capturing Ju-young. According to Hyung-sik, who was still pretending to be good, Jang-ho had fled to China, and the motive for killing Hak-soo was unclear. Yoonmi thought Jang-ho wanted to take Hak-soo's position of power by getting rid of him. However, this was just a guess, and Yoonmi had no proof that Jang-ho was involved. That night, while Do-young was still unconscious in the hospital, Ju-young was saved by a powerful woman with connections who knew where she was. However, Ju-young was captured again. This made Director So very angry. He was worried that if Chairman Kong took Ju-young, she would reveal who got rid of Hak-soo, and Director So's history would end. Meanwhile, it turned out that Jang-ho had secretly returned to Korea without Director So knowing. Jang-ho was involved in the Ansan region, and Chairman Kong tracked him down. Soon after, Chairman Kang's men were ordered to find Jang-ho again. On the other hand, Yoonmi decided to start looking from another angle. Instead of searching for Jang-ho, she looked for Lee Jin-suk, who had disappeared after the incident at her sushi restaurant. Meanwhile, even though Do-young was still not fully recovered, he insisted on searching for Ju Young as soon as possible. There, he asked Yumi for help to find out who was behind all these problems. At first, Yumi refused because the information was a police secret, but eventually, she agreed to help and named Jang Ho as a possible accomplice in Hak-Soo's crime. Shortly after, Yumi explained everything from the beginning, including Taegyu's loan shark practices, what happened to people who couldn't pay, and the illegal human and organ trafficking business. It was hard for the police to solve this case at first, but with Ju Young's help as an informant, they were able to arrest Hak-Soo, who was believed to be the mastermind of the criminal organization. Elsewhere, far from the complexities of the terrible case, Ju Young wakes up in a large and comfortable house. The woman who saved her turned out to be Lee Jin-suk, who wanted to help Ju Young again. There, Lee Jin-suk said she would protect Ju Young from anyone trying to disturb her. Whether her intentions were good or there was another motive, Lee Jin-suk seemed convincing. If Lee Jin-suk helps, then Director So, who is already under suspicion by Chairman Kong, will be in even more trouble because of the mess he has created. Turns out, Chairman Kong has ordered So to bring the person who killed Hak-Soo without hurting them, as he wants to question the killer himself. This order made Director So very nervous. He feared that his deceit would be exposed and he wouldn't have anyone to blame. At that time, Jang Ho has also become a threat to So because he knows as many secrets as Ju Young. So decided to eliminate Jang Ho first before Chairman Kong found out. Knowing his life was in danger, Jang Ho tried to seek protection. Soon after, Jang Ho contacted Yoonmi and said he would reveal who killed Hak-Soo if he was guaranteed protection. Yoonmi and Jang Ho agreed to meet, but Jang Ho was taken away by two men who knocked him out with a stun gun before the meeting. Fortunately, Do Young managed to catch up with him, but it was a trap, and he was knocked unconscious too. Shortly after, Do Young and Jang Ho were captured by two men working for Chairman Kong. However, Do Young was thrown elsewhere while Jang Ho was questioned by Secretary Kim about who killed Hak-Soo. At first, Jang Ho thought he would be protected, but it turned out Secretary Kim was working with Director So. Turns out, Secretary Kim was the one who killed Hak-Soo, and he and Director So planned to silence Jang Ho, the only witness. At that time, Director So wanted to kill Hak-Soo to take his position, while Kim killed Hak-Soo out of revenge. On the other hand, Do Young, who was supposed to be thrown away, fought back and convinced one of Kim's men to take him back to save Jang Ho. Meanwhile, Yumi tried to get help to find Do Young. In that moment, Do Young managed to rescue Jang Ho, but Jang Ho's leg was injured and his condition worsened, making him unconscious. Do Young had to carry him despite not being fully recovered himself. Soon after, Director So found them and tried to kill both. But then, Yumi arrived too late and lost track of Director So during the chase. Turns out, Director So's earlier attack left Jang Ho critically injured, and he died on the way to the hospital without revealing who killed Hak-Soo. That day, at Jin-suk's safe house, Ju Young received news that Hak-Soo had been murdered and found in the trunk of Do Young's car, which Ju Young often used. This made her worried about Do Young's safety because he might now be in danger from the people behind the murder. Chairman Kong knew that Kim was lying, so he became very angry. However, Chairman Kong didn't know about Jang Ho's death and told Kim to keep looking for him. Shortly after, Jang Ho's cell phone, which was left in the hotel room, was found by Hyung Shik. The phone had evidence of Hak-Soo's murder carried out by Kim and So. Hyung Shik used the phone to call Director So, making Director So realize he was still in big trouble. Director So was sure that Jang Ho had evidence on his phone that could incriminate him. The case seemed far from over, but Do Young was getting weaker due to serious injuries from the fight. Yumi insisted that he get medical treatment, knowing he would refuse because he still wanted to find Ju Young. Then, Do Young remembered that the person who killed Jang Ho was Director So, who was connected to Taegyu. Soon after, Do Young and Yumi decided to look for Taegyu to track down Director So's location. They used Taegyu's subordinate to help find him at his girlfriend's house. Unfortunately, when they arrived, Taegyu and his girlfriend had already been taken by Director So's men. But Do Young's determination to chase So is still strong because he thinks Ju Young is with them. He ignores Yoonmi, who believes Ju Young must be safe since she hasn't been seen with So's men anymore. Unbeknownst to Do Young, Ju Young knew that Do Young was aware of her past and still remembered it. Feeling ashamed and guilty, she tried to disappear. Fortunately, she was rushed to the hospital, and although her condition was critical, there was still hope for her survival. At the hospital, the janitor and nurse recognized Ju Young as the missing person from the posters distributed by Min Soo. The janitor contacted Min Soo, hoping for a reward. Min Soo then contacted Do Young, who immediately went to the hospital with Yoonmi. Jin Suk also arrived at the hospital, wanting to take Ju Young home. But when they entered the treatment room, Ju Young had already run away. She saw Do Young and Yoonmi looking for her and chose to avoid them. Soon after, Jin Suk found Ju Young again and asked if she would regret leaving Do Young. Ju Young said she had no regrets. They left once more, leaving Do Young in a state of despair and sadness, especially after finding out that Ju Young had a miscarriage. At that time, Yoonmi decided to trace Ju Young's steps from when she was taken by ambulance, hoping to find out who took her to the hospital, even though the chances were slim. On the other hand, Jin Suk advised Ju Young to face the problems caused by her past relationship with Hak Soo. The situation had gotten out of control. Soon after, Haeong Shik met with Director So and revealed that he knew who was behind Hak Soo's death and planned to hand over the evidence to the police. This was a warning that made Director So plan something evil against him. Director So threatened Haeong Shik by involving Yoonmi, making him scared that she might get hurt. The next day, Do Young returned to the office, and the branch manager gave him an additional 2 weeks of holiday. He came to meet Hanju, asking him to investigate the branch manager's funds connected to Taegyu's company, Seiryo. At that time, Do Young was suspicious because 20 million had been lent to the fake Seiryo company with the branch manager's approval, and the tax reports had been manipulated. Do Young thought there was something tricky going on. Hearing that, Hanju agreed to help him. Meanwhile, Ju Young asked Jin Suk for help to face the people behind Hak Soo's death. There, Jin Suk wanted to find a person called Red Starred, a subordinate of Hak Soo who betrayed him 3 years ago and worked with Ju Young. Ju Young believed that Red Starred was Director So but didn't know why he was targeting her. Jin Suk thought there must be someone higher than Hak Soo that So had to obey after Hak Soo's death. Turns out, Jin Suk was right. Chairman Kong was their highest boss, and Director So was worried that his betrayal would be revealed, which could get him killed by Chairman Kong. Because of this, Jin Suk decided to investigate further. Meanwhile, Ju Young decided to leave the house without Jin Suk knowing to get a recording she had hidden in the apartment. Her plan was to leave as soon as she got the recording device. But when she saw the crib in her room, she cried and stayed there for a while. When Do Young came home to the apartment, he found everything cleaned up, but Ju Young was gone. At that time, they missed each other. After that, Ju Young called Do Young, asking him not to look for her anymore because she didn't feel worthy of being with him. But Do Young refused, saying he loved her regardless of her past. He promised to keep looking for her everywhere. At that moment, Ju Young was being chased and kidnapped by 2 men sent by Director So, and her trail was lost again. However, Jin Suk still didn't know about this. Soon after, Yoonmi reopened Hak Soo's case file from 3 years ago and realized a file was missing. She suspected someone was betraying the police but didn't know who. Then, Do Young told Yoonmi that he had met Ju Young before she was kidnapped again, and she had left her recording device with him, asking him to investigate. Shortly after, Ju Young met Director So again. There, he gave her 2 choices to go abroad or face a tragic end in Korea. Hearing that, Ju Young couldn't answer. That day, Director So planned to frame Taegyu by making him confess to Hak Soo's murder in front of Chairman Kong. The problem is, Chairman Kong is not easily fooled. He knew Taegyu was lying when he claimed to have killed Hak Soo, and told Director So to hand him over to the police. Director So then contacted Haeong Shik to kill Taegyu in prison and make it look like he wants to kill himself. Soon after, Taegyu arrived at the police station, escorted by Director So's subordinate. At first, Do Young and Yoonmi didn't believe that the murderer had surrendered, but when they saw Taegyu, they realized he had been framed. There, Taegyu hesitated to approach the police building but shouted that he knew where Ju Young was when he saw Do Young. He hoped Do Young would help him find Ju Young. And his guess was right, and Do Young helped him escape to reclaim Ju Young and Mi Suk. Soon after, they got involved in a fight in a tunnel, but Taegyu ran away because he was scared. Do Young's attempt to force Director So's subordinate to take him to Ju Young was stopped by Haeong Shik and the police. Then, Do Young was arrested along with Director So's subordinate, leading to a fight between Haeong Shik and Yoonmi because they were on different sides. At that time, Haeong Shik tried to protect Director So's secret, while Yoonmi wanted to reveal the truth. Shortly after, Do Young chose to run away, still suspicious of Haeong Shik and worried about Ju Young, who was with Director So. Then, there was a chase, and Haeong Shik blocked all the roads, but fortunately, Do-young managed to escape with the help of Han-ju. In that moment, Do-young went to the hospital to chase after Director So's subordinate, but he was unsuccessful. While trapped in the heavily guarded area, he asked Yoonmi for help to get him out.
예, 후석.
Soon after, Yumi returned to the office after helping him. The next day, Do-young searched for Taegyu, as he was the only one who might know where Ju-young was. Taegyu was hiding in his subordinate's apartment and was also being searched by the police because his fingerprints were found on the knife used to kill Hak-soo. At the same time, Jin-suk took Jung-hwa to her house to look for the missing Ju-young. Meanwhile, Director So's plans had all gone wrong. Realizing he was in danger, he decided to force Ju-young to confess to Leader Kong that she killed Hak-soo. On the other hand, racing against time, Do-young found Taegyu and they went to find Ju-young together. Luckily, they were able to stop Director So before he reached her. At that time, Chairman Kong arrived at his office late, just as Do-young and Taegyu arrived at the building where Ju-young was being held. There, Mi-suk managed to escape thanks to a lighter thrown by Ha-eun, but Ju-young was trapped in a building that started to burn. Now, Chairman Kong learned that Director So had lied and falsely accused others of killing Hak-soo. Kim's presence made Director So too scared to say anything. Even though Director So was threatened with torture, Chairman Kong gave him time to bring Ju-young to him alive and unharmed. Meanwhile, the fire in the warehouse got worse. Do-young tried to find Ju-young amidst the flames and falling wood. He finally found her, but a wooden beam fell on him, knocking him unconscious. Fortunately, medical personnel found Do-young and rushed him to the hospital. On the way, he had a seizure and was in critical condition, remembering Ju-young in the fire. Sometime later, while Yoonmi was at the hospital watching over Do-young, she received news that Ju-young had died in the fire after her burned wallet was found. This situation put Director So in serious trouble, as Chairman Kong was furious that Director So failed to bring Ju-young. Then, Chairman Kong ordered his men to beat him to death. A few minutes later, Kim reported that Ju-young had died in the fire, which made Chairman Kong give Director So another chance to fix the problem. Meanwhile, Ju-young's family thought she was really dead and held a funeral ceremony. Yumi felt very guilty. However, back at the office, she still doubted Ju-young's death and ordered an autopsy. On the other hand, Ju-young's family wanted to speed up the funeral by cremating her body. Min-soo wanted this so that Ju-young's life insurance money would be distributed immediately. Ju-young had 2 life insurance policies worth 200 million, and Min-soo had always been obsessed with money. On the other hand, Do-young's mother was happy with the news because she didn't approve of Do-young marrying Ju-young. With Ju-young dead, she thought Do-young could more easily move on. She insisted that the cremation process not be delayed. Meanwhile, Yoonmi, still in the police force, was investigating Ju-young's death. She was told that the body was almost completely destroyed, making it hard to identify. This made Yoonmi even more suspicious. She believed Ju-young was still alive and wanted to confirm by performing an autopsy, but Min-soo refused the request. The cremation was finally carried out. Do-young remained unconscious, but after several days he had severe seizures and finally woke up. Do-young's mother's assistant told him that Ju-young had died. At that moment, Do-young couldn't believe it. He immediately asked to be discharged from the hospital after hearing that Min-soo was opening a restaurant using Ju-young's insurance money. There, Do-young felt relieved, thinking that Ju-young's family could now live independently without him. Soon after, Do-young went to Min-soo's place to collect Ju-young's belongings. There, Min-soo gave him a box containing Ju-young's wallet, her ID, and a photo of her miscarried baby. This made Do-young cry for a long time. He was so sad that he locked himself up at home for days, losing the will to live. Do-young was deeply depressed until he received a call from Taegyu, who wanted to meet. Taegyu was still being chased by Director So's men and the police. When they met, Taegyu was in disguise and asked about Mi-suk, who had disappeared after the fire. Do-young didn't know anything about Mi-suk because he only found Ju-young in the building. This made Do-young realize something important. Soon after, he rushed back to his apartment, thinking that if Mi-suk disappeared and didn't contact Taegyu, and there was only one body found in the building, Then there was a chance that Ju Young was the one who survived. The next day, Do Young went to the place where Ju Young was cremated. He met Yoonmi, who wanted to investigate Ju Young's death, but Do Young asked her to close the case. There, Yoonmi managed to tell him that Do Young was found unconscious at the back of the building, which means someone dragged him out, and that person could be Ju Young, who might still be alive. It was possible that Ju Young faked her death to escape the people chasing her. Do Young realized this and was determined to get rid of the mafia and criminals who were after him before Ju Young returned. At that time, Yoonmi helped by giving him a recording device Ju Young had left behind. It contained recordings of Ju Young's conversation with Director So from 3 years ago, when they agreed to work together to betray Hak-soo. This would be evidence to destroy Director So, but Do Young thought that if he knew Ju Young was an informant, someone must have leaked it. Soon after, Do Young met Yoonmi again to find out who the traitor in her team was. Yoonmi wasn't sure, but she handed over a photo of Director So's subordinate who might help with Do Young's revenge mission. The next day, Do Young meets Taegyu to get information about the dark organization. During their conversation, Do Young learns that there is someone even more powerful and intelligent behind Director So, controlling everything from behind the scene. According to Do Young, this person is the owner of the fictional company Seirio. So, he meets Hanju again to check if their branch manager has any records of suspicious transactions with this person. At that time, Hanju has done a thorough investigation but didn't find anything suspicious. They might be transacting using cash or gold bullion. Then, Do Young decides to go to Gyeonggi, where the company Seirio is handling a development project. The project seems suspicious, and on the day Do Young wants to investigate, the owner reportedly visits. That person is Director So, who pretends to behave normally. At that time, Do Young follows him to the bank, where Director So applies for a loan of 30 billion won, and Do Young manages to follow him to the headquarters. At the same time, Yoonmi tries to follow him from there to track his activities and tells Do Young to return to the bank. They weren't careful, so Director So noticed their movements and chose to block them and leave. There, Director So threatens Haeong-shik, saying that if Yoonmi is found disturbing him again, she will be killed. This threat makes Haeong-shik try to pull Yoonmi away from the investigation, leading to an argument. Yoonmi then chooses to return to the office. Elsewhere, Do Young meets Taegyu again. Taegyu reminds him about the leader he met when forced to confess to killing Hak-soo. They think this leader might have information about Mi-suk and Ju Young. Their goal is to find them and get revenge. Unbeknownst to them, Ju Young is still alive and has become a lone shark trying to take over Leader Kang's territory. At that time, Ju Young tries to get a man nicknamed Hammerhead to join her business, but he refuses. A few hours after meeting Ju Young, Hammerhead is approached by Do Young, who offers to collaborate in the loan shark business. Turns out, Do Young does this to attract the attention of Director So and Chairman Kong by disrupting their business. Do Young's offer is very attractive to Hammerhead because the profits are greater, making him consider betraying So. Later, Do Young finds the place where Director So's subordinate, Soo Nam, is hiding kidnapped people as collateral for debt payment. Haeong-shik arrives that night, pretending to take Soo Nam to the police station. However, because of So's threats, Soo Nam is released again. Luckily, the kidnapped victims are rescued during this incident. However, Soo Nam's disappearance that night made Do Young realize that Haeong-shik was a spy. Soon after, Do Young asked Yoonmi to investigate before coming back to help. The Hammerhead was beaten by Soo Nam and forced to reveal who reported him to the police. Although Do Young's identity was discovered and he was almost killed, he ordered Haeun, the daughter of a bankrupt cream factory director, to trick Soo Nam. But Ju Young arrived to save Do Young and captured Soo Nam. Haeun was rescued and taken to the police station by Do Young. Even though several cases were resolved, a new, complicated chapter began. During Yoonmi's investigation into her suspicions about Haeong-shik, she discovered that Hae-jung, Director So's lover, was involved in his criminal activities. Not wanting his girlfriend to know about his deceit, Haeong-shik asked for cooperation to stop So. But Hae-jung said it was too late to clear her name. She only offered him the option to run away with her to Korea when the time came. At the police station, Haun finally met her father again. Do-young also received thanks, although he didn't accept them because he felt it was his responsibility. After the incident in the parking lot and seeing Ju-young again, Do-young wanted to find out more about Jin-suk. Turns out, Jin-suk and Ju-young have known each other since Ju-young used to work at Jin-suk's club. Then, Yumi said that if Ju-young was with Jin-suk, Do-young didn't need to worry because she would be safe because Jin-suk is powerful and strong in the dark business world. Meanwhile, Jin-suk herself handled Soo-nam. Afraid of being tortured, Soo-nam was forced to reveal the leader who ordered Ju-young's capture. There, Soo-nam finally said Director So's name. Jin-suk then contacted him using Soo-nam's phone and warned him that she would take revenge for her younger sister's death, caused by Director So. And the younger sister Jin-suk referred to was actually Ju-young. In that moment, Jin-suk deliberately said Ju-young was dead to make Director So believe she was no longer a threat. At that time, Director So was truly on the brink of disaster. Haeong-shik also knew that his career and relationships would be ruined. Then, he tried to get Do-young to cooperate, but Do-young refused. They almost fought, and Do-young told him to confess all his sins to Yoonmi. Then, Do-young decided to work with Hanju and Taegyu, making them his informants. Soon after, Hanju discovered that the Saerio company sent 2 billion won to an interior design company, which was suspicious because the cost seemed too high. There, Hanju helped Do-young trace it to find out who was behind Saerio, believing it would lead them to the leader. The next day, Jin-suk took bolder steps against Director So. She reported his plan to murder her to Yoonmi. After that, they all headed to the dock for their own reasons, but their main goal was revenge. Then, a fight broke out there. Fortunately, Do-young managed to control the situation and got information about Chairman Kong. There, Do-young defeated all of Director So's men, but Director So was shot by Haeong-shik because he tried to kill Yoonmi. The gunshot wound was fatal, and So was rushed to the hospital. At that time, Soo-nam was taken to the police office to provide more information about Leader Kong. On the other hand, Taegyu, who was asked by Yoonmi to find the hiding hammerhead, received news that So had been arrested and that Taegyu's name would be cleared of all murder charges. Despite this good news, Taegyu was still worried that Soo-nam might be silenced by Chairman Kong in prison or at the police station, as this was a common method to keep people quiet. Now, Taegyu is still not safe from the accusations. His criminal activities will continue as long as there is money. They have to make sure Soo-nam stays safe and alive until he testifies in court. Unfortunately, when Do-young and Yoonmi arrived at the location, Soo-nam had already been killed by someone under Kang's orders. At the hospital, So is also in danger because Haeong-shik wants to get rid of him to keep him quiet about their collaboration. Soon after, Haeong-shik was invited to work with Secretary Kim to eliminate So. The reward was a promotion and a large sum of money. Haeong-shik agreed to do it, but when he returned to the treatment room, Director So had disappeared. Turns out, Hae-jung had taken him away. Then, everything became chaotic. Shortly after, Do-young and Yoonmi tried to find Director So because he would be a key witness in uncovering this big criminal conspiracy. During this time, Hanju informed Do-young that his investigation had been discovered by the branch manager. There, Hanju had to stop helping Do-young due to the threat of an investigation into the 20 billion won funds from the Saerio company, which Do-young had to continue himself. Meanwhile, Ju-young tried to find Hae-jung to catch her. At the same time, Do-young's investigation into the flow of funds led him to Hae-jung, who was pretending to be a representative of a fake interior design company. Ju-young didn't dare to appear because Hanju was in the room, so she asked Yoonmi to arrest Hae-jung. But before Yoonmi arrived, Haeong-shik got there first and forced Hae-jung to tell him where So was so he could kill her. Fortunately, Yoonmi arrived just in time. She asked Hae-jung to take her to Director So's location. Meanwhile, So had woken up and severely injured Haeong-shik, who was bleeding badly and eventually died on the spot. When Yoonmi found him, So ran away again with Hae-jung. At that time, Do-young didn't try to chase them because he was talking to Ju-young, who had met him. They decided to solve the problem together. There, Do-young asked Ju-young to hide until the situation was resolved. Then, Ju-young decided to return to Jin-suk's house. After Haeong-shik's death, all his subordinates helped Yoonmi solve the case and arrest the perpetrators. Soon after, all the loan sharks in Chairman Kang's network were arrested by the police, stopping their activities. This put pressure on the leadership. So Kong told So to hide abroad until things calmed down and someone else would take his place. Feeling betrayed, So planned to cheat Kong and escape with a lot of money. At that moment, Director So lost quickly to Kim, who was at the bank to freeze all his accounts and take the money. However, Do-young's presence made the branch manager reconsider giving the Serio company a loan. Do-young then met with Head Hammer, found by Taegyu, but Head Hammer refused to cooperate and suggested Do-young collaborate with a loan shark named S, who was actually Ju-young. At that time, Director So was panicking because all his accounts were frozen and his money was gone. Because of that, he also wanted revenge against Kim. Meanwhile, Do-young was approached by his mother's assistant, who leaked information about the Serio company and the people behind it. Do-young was advised to ask his mother for help. But his mother had conditions that Do-young had to inherit the family business and marry a woman of her choice, not Ju-young. Do-young's mother had more power and was respected by Chairman Kong. Everything Do-young did led to a situation where both Chairman Kong and Director So were threatening each other. Chairman Kong wanted to get rid of Director So, who was in his way, but Jin Suk and Ju-young were also looking for him. Director So knew his life might end soon, so he decided to expose everything about Chairman Kang's evil business, especially human trafficking. Then, he contacted Yoonmi to turn himself in. When Director So returned to his base to get all the evidence, Chairman Kong found him first and killed him. Shortly after, Yoonmi found Director So's lifeless body in the parking lot. Later, Chairman Kong contacted Do-young to invite him to a meeting. At that time, Do-young decided to go alone without telling anyone. Instead of discussing their grudges and problems, Chairman Kong offered Do-young a partnership. However, he rejected the offer and left. The next day, Ju-young was also trying to meet Chairman Kong, and Do-young, along with Jin Suk, looked for any chance to reach Kang's leadership. They wanted revenge. At the same time, Ju-young asked Hammerhead for help, but he refused because he was scared. Then, Ju-young saw another opportunity through Hae-jung, who knew about Chairman Kang's dealings with the bank. Meanwhile, Do-young tries to stop the flow of loan funds from the bank to Chairman Kong. Even though his efforts fail, Do-young asks his mother not to interfere in the problems with Chairman Kong. Do-young wants to solve it himself. Then, he orders Taegyu to frame his branch manager in a bribery case, but unknown to him. This will also bring Taegyu in to testify in the case of Director So's death and clear his name from the list of suspects. Later, Do-young contacts Ju-young after getting her business card as Loan Shark S. They talk and realize that they both remembered each other all this time. There, Do-young asks Ju-young not to get involved with Chairman Kong again because it's very dangerous. He promises to solve the problem for her. Do-young doesn't want to lose Ju-young again. Meanwhile, Hae-jung is arrested for being involved in bribery and money laundering. This time, all the cases are handled by Do-young's mother, who is even willing to give the branch manager a break to get his cooperation. Elsewhere, Kim went beyond his limits. He provoked Taegyu by saying that Mi-suk was dead, and then kidnapped Ju-young, pretending he was taking her to Chairman Kong. Turns out, it was a trick to get Do-young to come to Chairman Kong. What Kim didn't know was that Chairman Kong had promised Do-young's mother he wouldn't bother her son again. So, when Ju-young arrived, Chairman Kong asked Kim to return her. But Kim, being cunning, sent Ju-young to be sold to China. Meanwhile, Do-young met Chairman Kong, who told him that Kim was the culprit and that Do-young should go after him. With the help of Hammerhead, Do-young was able to track down Ju-young and bring her home. However, Taegyu, feeling betrayed by Do-young about Mi-suk's death, took revenge. He stabbed Do-young, putting his life in danger. Because of that, Do-young was rushed to the hospital for surgery to stop the bleeding, but fortunately, he survived. After recovering, Do-young was able to live happily with Ju-young. They got married and started their new life together in the coastal area of Inzong. Meanwhile, Jin Suk replaced Kong as the leader of the loan shark business. The series ends. The moral lesson from this series is if you ever get mixed up with loan sharks and secret plots, just remember to avoid parking lots, always keep a fake ID, and don't trust anyone with a nickname like Hammerhead.